Hey Rick, thanks for your phone call today discussing your drivability issues with your 190 SL, and I think we've got it narrowed down to an issue with your fuel filter assembly and fuel selector valve unit, which is obviously inside the engine compartment and on the driver's side, and of course you got your pull rod that goes to it to pull back for reserve and push forward for main fuel supply. And I think the problem is this cork inside here. So what we're going to do is discuss rebuilding this thing. First of all, you've got this is the late style. This is the most popular style of filter assembly. The earlier style uses a permanent metal screen inside here and is smaller unit. It has a smaller cork, but this cork right here can be cut down and be made into the smaller cork for the earlier unit, but you don't see many of those. And what you have here, as you probably know, is you've got your fuel filter inside here. Alright, so we've got a seal that goes up here. Fuel filter goes here, and of course your big seal ring goes at the base. So your cap can go on here, and you've got a spring up inside here to maintain tension on the filter when it's installed. One of the problems you'll run into is this cap up here. This one's already broken, but there's a little cap up here that puts pressure on the filter housing, and that cap will break. So what you'll end up doing is stacking washers underneath here to maintain some pressure on the cap and on the housing here, and make sure it seals so that you don't have any leakage, because that's the problem that you have is you lose prime on the system. You don't actually have a leak because there's no pressure on the system, but you end up losing prime and you get a vacuum leak. Yeah, I can't believe I just got that in there. Now there. All right, so in order to remove this, your best bet is you flare nut wrenches, 14 millimeter. And the reason for that is because you don't want to booger up these fittings, because that attaches to this whole line that goes all the way back to the tank. So you want to be careful of these fittings. You want to take these fittings off. And what I suggest is you break the fitting loose like this so that you have it loose. And then if you can unscrew it by hand, great, unscrew it by hand. If it's tensioned, then remove the filter assembly from the car to where you can wiggle it around and you can remove the tension from the lines. And this is the exact way you want to reinstall it. You don't want to bolt this down and then try to put these things in here, because a lot of times these lines are under tension and you can run the risk of cross-threading your steel into your aluminum. And so when you're reinstalling, hook up your lines first, because then you get some leverage. You can wiggle this around, get the lines hooked up and started, threaded all the way in to where they're finger tight, and then bolt this to the car. So now we're going to dismantle this thing. Actually, we're going to clean it up a little bit. This is one I just had in inventory. I have no idea what it looks like inside, but first thing we're going to do is clean it up a little bit where you can at least see what you're dealing with here. I'm going to do this away from the camera, where I can make a mess over here. Yeah, this thing was filthy. I don't understand how so much grease can get on something that's not anywhere near the grease. All right, now you can see what we're working with here. You've got a lock tab right here, and you're going to bend that out of the way, depending upon how strong it is, or how strong you're feeling. All right, lock tab is undone. You're going to take a 14 millimeter and unscrew this thing. It does not need to be on there super tight. As you can see, it just came off very easily. Save the lock tab. You can reuse it. Handle comes off. It's indexed, obviously, and it should not have a bend to it. Some of them do, but it's just supposed to be straight for the most part. All right, now we're going to move over to the vise because, well, let's see. I'll tell you what we're going to do and why. This cap right here is held in place by a snap ring right inside here. And that snap ring, if someone who installed it last was nice, they put the snap ring to where you can access it through this slot. That's what that slot is for. The mean people in the world will put the snap ring in there to where there's no snap ring access right here, where the gap in the snap ring lines up with the gap right here. That's the mean people, because you then have a very difficult time getting to that snap ring. So let's see if we got lucky here. And what we're going to do is I'm going to use the vise. We're going to put this or a socket on here. I'm going to squeeze it down to release tension on here, and then I'm going to pop out that snap ring. So show you that process. Does not require much. Let's get the camera position where you can see what's going on a little bit better. Alright, so see this? It's going to go in. There we go, slowly. Just a little bit. You can feel the bottom out. Now let's see if we don't have a snap ring in here we can pop out. Okay, there's the snap ring. Look at that. Somebody was thoughtful and had the snap ring in the right place. Just hold everything together. Release. And come back over here and you can see what's going on. Okay. It's not under tension particularly. You just don't want anything to fall out before you see it come apart. Snap rings off. This cap, with luck, will come out with a little bit of effort. Got a spring, and for whatever reason, the Germans, being very thorough people, always put a fiber washer right there for the spring to sit up against. I don't know why. So now out comes the slide valve itself. And that's what the slide valve looks like. And that's what the cork looks like down inside there. All right, so what I think has happened, in fact, you can see it on this example right here. Obviously, this slide valve, these holes have to line up with these holes right here. Well, if you look inside there, deep down inside there, this cork is shrunk, and so there's no cork seal right here. These fuel inlet and outlets are above the level of the cork, so that means there's absolutely no sealing going on. You have metal-to-metal contact, and you're going to have an air leak in here, and that's just what happens to the cork eventually. So what we're going to do is dig that cork out of there. You can see how brittle it is. Just cracks and comes right out. And that is the whole problem, because you can tell the difference in the thickness of the cork. All right, you can see how the cork is shrunk in by half thickness. All right, so what you're going to do is simply clean this out. To your heart's desire, clean it out as much as you want. And next step is going to be to reinstall the cork. Now what I like to do is I like to soak the cork in hot water This cork floats, so you put some hot water in a glass or Pyrex thing, and then you weight this down with a spoon or whatever, let it soak in the hot water. In fact, what I do is I got a shop Pyrex that I put in the microwave with water, put that in there, and then weight it down with a socket or whatever, and let it soak in the hot water. It makes it more pliable. And then I also will lubricate, make sure there's no grit and grime in here, make sure this is not bunged up, and make it nice and smooth inside here. And if you need to, hit it with a little Scotch-Brite. A little green Scotch-Brite is your friend. And the same for here. Scotch-Brite here, make sure this is good, make sure your perimeter is good. And then what I will do is I will take some lubricant, like anti-seize, and I will coat the inside here, and make sure to get a nice wipe inside here so that the cork will go down in there smoothly. And the key to this whole operation is this might drop down in there, but once you get it in the water, it swells up a little bit. But you can, and the reason I do that make it more flexible is you got this very thin septum right here. It has to go down in between here. You want to make sure it doesn't break for any reason. And what I'll do is I will take a couple of punches like this and line it up so that it goes right down in the holes. And this one's just sliding down very nicely, but it's dry and it has shrunk. So make sure it goes down inside there. And then make sure it gets down in between that septum right there. And then I'll put some anti-seize again on this face right here and install it. And make sure it's smooth and feels great. And remember, this thing's indexed, so you can't put it in wrong. You can't put it in upside down, because the lever goes on here and this goes right like this. And then you take your spring, got your slide valve in here, you've got your spring, got your cap, and then you compress this again, put your snap ring in place, remembering to have it across the cap, the gap right here, and that is it. And then you're ready to rock and roll. I'm thinking, see if there's anything I've forgotten. I don't think so. Let's see, anything I've forgotten? Nope. And then just put your fuel lines in there by finger tight by hand, and then until they're snug. Bolt this down, and then do your final tightening once this thing is bolted down with your flare nut wrenches. And I think, oh yeah, and then the fuel line that comes out, the original cloth covered fuel line that comes out of here, those things have a tendency to leak internally, but you'll never know it because the rubber hose leaks and it wicks out to the cloth covering on the rubber hose, and then that cloth covering disguises the fuel leak, and the fuel will dry up, and you'll never know that you've got a fuel leak in the rubber hose that comes out and loops around. And what I'll do is, if there's any question of the situation, I will pressurize the gas tank with about 5 or 10 psi of compressed air, and watch all along the fuel system from the tank to the fuel pump to see if any fuel seeps out. And the reason for that is because the fuel system is not under pressure. And so there's no reason for the fuel to seep out of there since there's no pressure on the system. But that also means if you have a leak, while fuel won't come out, air will get in there and you'll lose prime. And that's another reason people have trouble with their carburetors and your priming lever on your fuel pump not functioning, because the fuel pump is trying to draw air, and it won't work. The fuel system is a closed system with no air getting into it. So I hope this makes sense. If you have any questions, just ask. Thanks, and good luck.